Waiters, what date was so awkward that you still talk about it with your coworkers? Welcome back, guys. A bad date at a restaurant has to be extra uncomfortable. You can try to act normal, but the waiter keeps coming back to the table while both of you pretend the conversation is going fine. And they probably notice way more than people realise. The awkward pauses, one person doing all the talking, someone suddenly becoming very interested in the menu. They definitely have enough experience to spot these things. Okay, let's start. Story 1. The salad wasn't about her figure. It was the last course of a planned breakup. I was 25 at the time, waiting tables at an upscale steakhouse, the kind of place where a dinner for two easily runs over $100, and people come to celebrate things or impress people. This was a couple of years ago on a packed Friday night, and I still bring it up with my coworkers because none of us have ever seen anything like it since. I got a couple in their early 30s seated in my section. The guy announced himself before he even sat down, if that makes sense. Shook the hostess's hand way too long, asked if we could do better than the table she gave them, laughed at his own joke about needing room for his elbows. Not screaming rude, just exhausting. His date was quiet, put together, polite. First red flag came fast. I asked what they'd like, and before she could open her mouth, he ordered a ribeye for himself and then said, "She'll just do a salad, she's watching her figure," and actually winked at me. I glanced at her, expecting embarrassment. She just smiled and said, "That's fine." Totally calm. I remember noting how calm, but I didn't think much of it yet. The whole meal was a monologue. His salary, his gym routine, some property he was about to close on. Every time she tried to say something, he talked right over her without even noticing. I've served 100 bad dates, and the woman usually shrinks a little as the night goes on. She didn't. She sat there listening like she was taking notes. I actually mentioned it to a coworker in passing. The woman at table 12 seems weirdly unbothered for someone being talked at like a podcast guest. He shrugged and said maybe she's used to it. She's just been insulted 3 times in one breath and hasn't blinked. That calm should worry him, not comfort him. Mid-meal, the guy stood up, held his phone in the air, and announced it was client-related, and he had to take this. Walked outside like he was closing a merger. I came by to refill waters while he was gone. She caught my eye and said quietly, "He's really giving it his all tonight." I gave her the careful, sympathetic look you learn in this job, and then she said, almost casually, "I'm ending it tonight. That's why we're here." I just stood there with the water pitcher. She explained in about 20 seconds. Public place, so he'd keep it together. She'd already moved her things out of his apartment that afternoon. She wanted to sit through one more dinner to be absolutely sure, and, her words, "He's been very convincing." Then she asked if I could quietly run her card right then, just for her salad. I did it. Handed the folder back, she signed, tucked the receipt in her purse like it was nothing. She'd already moved out and already paid before he got back to the table. That's not nerves, that's a plan. He came back in still talking loudly about his call, none the wiser. Dessert arrived. He was mid-sentence about the property when she set her fork down and said calmly that she was done. Not yelling, not crying. Just, it's over, her stuff is already out, and she'd paid for her part of dinner. He started to raise his voice, got about 4 words in, and she slowly looked around the crowded dining room. He caught himself. He had built his entire evening on looking impressive in that room, and now it was a cage. He had to sit there, jaw clenched, while she put her coat on. On her way out, she thanked me by name. She'd read my name tag, and left a cash tip on the table. He sat alone for a good 10 minutes. When I brought the rest of the bill, he pulled out his card without looking at me. Tipped $3 on a check well over 100. I told one coworker. By close, the entire staff knew, including the kitchen. He spent the whole dinner performing for that room, and she let the room finish the job for her. $3 on 100, and he still doesn't get why. Here's the part that made it legendary, though. Months later, on a slow weeknight, she came in with a group of girlfriends, clearly celebrating something. She spotted me first, smiled, and said, "I owe you a better tip than that salad covered." She was not kidding either. To this day, we call Table 12 the salad table, and every new hire gets told the story of the calmest breakup any of us have ever witnessed. She came back months later to settle the tip from a salad, planned the exit, executed it clean, and still remembered the server by face. I really like this woman. Story 2. I served a first date where a guy bragged about being a director, to the actual director he was lying about. I'm a server in my mid-20s at an upscale place that sits right next to a huge corporate office park, so most of our tables are business dinners and first dates. After a couple years, you learn to read a table in about 30 seconds. This one took me all night, and I've never been happier to be wrong. The guy showed up early, moved the candle and the table setting around, and asked me, loudly enough for 2 other tables to hear, for the best wine that isn't overpriced. Fine, whatever. Then his date arrived, and she was the opposite of him. Warm, polite, dressed nicely, but not flashy. From little things they said, I gathered they'd met on an app, and both profiles just said they worked in tech at a big company nearby, no specifics. That detail matters later. From the first drink order, he never stopped talking. He was in a senior leadership position. He basically ran the regional operation. He name-dropped executives like they were his golf buddies. When she asked what he actually did, he said, director-level stuff, mostly strategy. Here's the thing I only appreciated later. She kept asking really specific questions. Oh, who do you report to? How's the restructuring going? Did that West Coast merger ever close? He'd wave a hand, say something vague, and keep monologuing. I honestly thought she was just being polite and interested. She was not. She already had the answers. He just kept volunteering new ones. It got worse. He ordered her entree without asking her. He corrected me on the wine. Incorrectly, by the way. At one point, he claimed he personally approved some huge client migration project. Every time, her smile got a little tighter. Then he crossed a line even I noticed. Mid-brag, he casually mentioned that the company was cutting 40 people from the cloud team next month, and named a client they hadn't announced yet. Her expression changed. Not angry. Sharper. Harder to read. Oh, he just made it real. Bragging about a job you don't have is embarrassing. Naming unannounced clients and layoff counts to someone you met an hour ago is genuinely dangerous. When dessert menus came, she perked up and got chatty again, and I genuinely thought, okay, the date recovered. Looking back, she was giving him one last chance. And he took that chance and buried it. He started mocking clueless upper management at his company, specifically the regional office, saying whoever ran it probably got the job through connections and doesn't know what actual work looks like. She quietly flagged me down and asked for separate checks. He protested, insisting he'd cover it since he can afford it, and started fumbling for his card. She just handed me hers first. It was a corporate card, same company he'd been talking about all night. Her name, and under it, Regional Director. She let him see it. Then she said, completely calm, that she found the evening fascinating because he'd spent 2 hours describing her job as his own. And then the line I will quote until I die. It's funny. I approve the org chart every quarter, and I've never seen your name on it. He went grey. Started stammering that he was joking around, that she was taking it wrong. She didn't raise her voice once. Turns out he was an entry-level contractor who sat in on the weekly all-hands meetings and had access to internal slide decks, enough to sound credible, nowhere near enough to survive her questions. She'd figured him out somewhere around the appetizers and stayed to see how far he'd take it. He paid his half, left me a terrible tip, and practically speed-walked out. She stayed, finished her dessert alone, tipped generously, and joked with me that this was still not her worst app date, which is a terrifying thought. Here's the aftershock. She became a semi-regular for business lunches, and months later she mentioned, almost offhand, that his contract quietly wasn't renewed. Not out of spite, she said. He'd disclosed confidential layoff numbers and an unannounced client name to a total stranger in a public restaurant. The lying was pathetic. That part was a fireable offence. The staff still calls that spot the director's table, and I learned something I use every shift now. Never assume the quiet one at the table is the one with less power. She waited months before mentioning it, and even then she wasn't gloating. She just calmly explained which part actually crossed the line. 2 hours of sitting across from someone lying to her face, and she never once lost her composure. Story 3. I served a blind date that turned out to be a deposition with breadsticks and a recording phone. A couple of years ago, I was waiting tables at a mid-range Italian place, the kind with candles in wine bottles, and a hostess stand that saw at least one first date a night. I was in my mid-20s and thought I'd seen every flavour of awkward. Then this couple got seated in my section on a slow Tuesday, and to this day the staff calls their table the interview table. They were both late 20s, dressed nice, clearly a blind date from the stiff introductions. She seemed warm and easy to talk to. He seemed normal for about 4 minutes. She ordered a glass of white wine and he goes, completely unprompted. My ex only drank this one specific red. She had incredible taste in wine. I thought, okay, weird thing to say. Nerves, maybe. Then she ordered a pasta dish, and he told her that was his ex's favourite order. Then she laughed at one of his jokes, and he actually said his ex used to laugh louder. He's not nervous. He's measuring his date against his ex in real time and somehow expecting that to come across as a compliment. By my third trip to the table, I was making eye contact with the other waiter across the room like, are you hearing this? The whole staff started rotating past on fake errands just to catch pieces of it. The kitchen was getting live updates. Here's the part that confused all of us. She never got annoyed. Not once. She kept asking follow-up questions. Where did they used to go together? When did they break up? Does he still talk to her? I figured she was either the most polite woman alive or a complete pushover. At one point I was refilling waters and heard her ask, very calmly, "Do you still have any photos of her?" I genuinely thought she was torturing herself. He pulled out his phone and showed her actual photos. I heard him say he kept them in case we get back together. I need to remind myself what I lost. I nearly dropped the water pitcher. Back in the kitchen, the hostess bet $5 the woman would walk out before dessert. She excused herself to the bathroom and we all assumed that was it. She was going out the side door and I'd never see her again. She came back, sat down, and ordered tiramisu. We were baffled. Then he stepped outside to take a phone call, and she flagged me over. I figured she wanted the check split preemptively. Instead, she smiled and said, "I should probably explain because you all keep walking past." She wasn't a blind date. She was his ex-girlfriend's new roommate. Oh. She came in knowing exactly who he was. Every question I'd been wincing at was a deliberate move, and he walked right into every single one. Apparently, the ex had been getting late-night texts and accidental run-ins from this guy for months, and his friends kept insisting he was over it, that she was exaggerating. A mutual friend who still ran in his circle felt bad, but didn't want to confront him directly. So when he asked her to set him up with someone, she set him up with the roommate. On purpose. So someone could see it firsthand. Then she tapped her phone, which had been sitting face down on the table near him the entire meal, and said it was recording voice memos and had picked up better than expected. Every polite question suddenly meant something different. Where did you go together? Establishing a pattern. Do you still talk to her? Getting him on record? And the photos question, the one I'd overheard and felt bad about. She was getting proof he was still carrying them around. I hadn't watched a date. I'd watched a deposition with breadsticks. Every one of those polite questions was building a file, and he never once wondered why she was so calm about his ex. He came back in, she smiled through the rest of dessert like nothing happened, let him pay, gave him what I am certain was a fake number, and walked out. Half the staff was crowded by the kitchen door watching in silence. The aftershock came weeks later. I was telling the story to a new hire, and one of our servers casually mentioned she'd heard through a friend of a friend that the recordings worked. The ex played them for his friend group. They finally stopped covering for him, and she blocked him everywhere. No dramatic scene, no confrontation. Just a quiet ripple I never would have known about if my coworker hadn't happened to mention it. Months of the ex saying something was wrong, and nobody believed her until someone brought proof. One recorded dinner did what confrontation couldn't. So that's the date I still talk about. And honestly, ever since then, whenever I see someone on a date being suspiciously patient with a guy who won't stop talking about his ex, I check the table for a phone lying face down, and I wonder. That woman trained an entire restaurant staff to spot a sting operation, and she'll never know it. Story 4. I watched 2 of his recycled dates realise it and decide to wait for him together. I've been bartending at the same cocktail bar for about 5 years now, and there's one night from a couple years back that we still bring up at least once a month. So we had this regular. Guy in his 30s, well-dressed, charming in that way that feels a little too smooth once you've seen it more than once. He came in almost every Tuesday, always with a different woman. Same corner table every time. He'd order the same signature cocktail for the lady, before she even opened the menu. And then he'd tell the same story, word for word, about how his late grandfather used to bring his grandmother to this exact table back in the day. The bar opened 6 years ago. I helped hang the shelves. The bar's only 6 years old, and the person telling this story helped hang those shelves. There was never a grandmother at that table, and Tuesday Guy is counting on nobody doing the math. We called him Tuesday Guy. The kitchen kept an actual tally on a sticky note. By the time this happened, he was well past a dozen different women. And one thing I noticed but didn't understand until later, he always showed up 15 minutes late, every single time. The woman would already be seated, checking her phone, getting anxious, and then he'd stroll in and she'd look almost relieved to see him. So one Tuesday, a woman comes in alone and sits at the bar instead of the corner table. She orders the signature cocktail, the exact one he always orders, for the lady, and something clicks in my head. I know her face. She was one of his dates, maybe 5 weeks earlier. She'd sat at the bar for a minute before he arrived, which is why I remembered her. I figured she was meeting someone new. Good for her. 20 minutes later, another woman walks in. Also heads for the bar. Also orders the same cocktail. And my stomach just drops, because I recognise her too from about 3 weeks back. They're sitting 2 stools apart, both checking their phones, both clearly waiting on someone. Eventually, they start making polite small talk, the way strangers at a bar do. I'm polishing glasses way slower than necessary because I can feel where this is going. 2 women, 2 stools apart, same drink, same man. The bartender already knows more about this guy's dating life than either of them does. One of them mentions who she's waiting for. The other one goes quiet. Same first name, same description, same bar, and as it turned out, the same "let's try again, I had a great time" text he'd apparently sent to multiple old dates. They compared phones right there in front of me. Identical messages, identical compliments. He'd even copy-pasted the grandfather story into a text to one of them. The first woman stood up and grabbed her coat. I honestly thought that was the end of it. Then the second one hesitated and said, "Actually, wait. Does he still think he has the table tonight?" They both looked at me. The corner table was empty, no other reservation. I gave a small nod. One of them laughed nervously and the other said, "I kind of want to see his face." They moved to the corner table together. I set down 2 menus without being asked. I'm not proud to admit the entire kitchen staff quietly gathered at the pass window like it was a movie premiere. You know a bar has good stories when the kitchen staff treats one of them like a live event? 15 minutes late, right on schedule, in walks Tuesday Guy. He scans the room, finds his table, and sees 2 women sitting at it. His smile flickered for half a second, then reset. He walked over smooth as anything, probably assuming one of them was a friend tagging along. One of the women just said, "Sit down, we have some things in common." He didn't sit. He tried the grandfather story anyway, I guess out of pure muscle memory, and one of the women cut him off and finished it word for word. He went to order drinks and I already had 2 of his signature cocktails on the table. Then came the line we still quote in the kitchen. One of the women, completely calm. "Tell us again about your grandfather's table." She didn't yell. She just handed him his own script and waited for him to realise where he was sitting. That's surgical. He went pale, tried to laugh, tried the charm one more time, and it just died in the silence. He actually looked at me like I was going to bail him out. I looked away and started polishing glasses. One of the women quietly told him to leave. He walked out fast and never looked back. I comped their round. They stayed another hour laughing, comparing everything, including a playlist he'd apparently made for both of them. They exchanged numbers that night and became actual friends. They still come in together sometimes. On Tuesdays, obviously. He never came back. Months later, one of them heard he was running the same routine at a bar across town. Different grandfather, different table, same script. We still call that corner spot the grandfather table, and every new hire gets the story on their first Tuesday shift. He didn't even bother writing a new lie, just picked a new zip code. I love that these 2 turned his whole act into their own friendship instead. Yeah, waiters hear everything. After this set, I fully understand why certain tables get nicknames. The salad table breakup was my favourite. She had her plan, paid for her food, left calmly, and still came back later to make sure the server got a better tip. I respect that. Tuesday Guy also deserved that empty table moment. 2 women finding each other through his copy-paste routine and becoming friends is a much better ending than him getting away with it again. Please be normal at restaurants. See you next time. Welp, you've made it to the end of this video, but there's so much more to watch. I thought you might like this video next.